Welcome back to Channel 5. It's New Year's Eve 1969, and today we will be revisiting the most significant events through the past decade.
Beginning with our president in 1961, we bring to you Nikki Shaw presenting President Kennedy.
Throwing it back to 6 years ago, November 22nd, 1963, we lost a great man, leader, and President John F. Kennedy. A hero, President Kennedy prevented a nuclear war in 1962 when nuclear missile sites were being built in Cuba. Due to his firmness and resolve, Kennedy was capable of preventing Cuba from beginning a nuclear war by establishing a blockade to prevent Soviets from bringing in more nuclear weapons and military supplies. A year before this, President Kennedy had established the Peace Corps in March 1961. The Peace Corps is a volunteer program that focuses on the idealism of the younger generation and sends young Americans to foreign countries to promote world peace and friendship. This establishment still prospers to the date. This was only one of Kennedy's great feats at expanding public service and trying to spread peace not only within the nation but also throughout the world. However, on November 22, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from the 6th floor from the Texas School Book Depository building at President Kennedy, killing him instantly. While many believe this to be true, many conspiracies were made about what truly happened on November 22nd at 12:30 p.m. On the last note, there have been several conspiracies revolving around the case of President Kennedy, and here's our head editor, Natalia Stahl, with an interesting story from back in the day.
Dallas, Texas, Monday, November 25th, 1963. On this day, we take a moment to gather our thoughts and prayers. This weekend, America was turned on its head following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on Friday and the successive murder of Lee Harvey Oswald. What really happened was the following. Lee Harvey Oswald was the product of Soviet mind control. The USSR's launch of satellite Sputnik 6 years ago was an immediate threat. However, we never knew just how much danger we were in until now. Using the satellite, the Soviets were able to manipulate Oswald through a tiny microchip implanted in his brain, placed there during a trip to the Soviet Union in 1959, which we have now been made aware of. Fearing Kennedy's anti-communist beliefs and growing power, the Soviets decided to activate Oswald, using this mind control to cause him to shoot Kennedy. The chip had also been programmed to detach from the brain after use, moving through the body to be excreted, so as to never be detected. It is for this reason that Oswald appeared completely unaware of what was occurring. The chip had begun detachment. However, total excrement from the body would take several days, and Oswald was already in custody within hours after the shooting. Upon learning of this news, the Soviets used Sputnik once again to determine the location of the chip and found that it was still slowly navigating Oswald's digestive system. This is where the story gets a bit twisty, folks. The Soviets are in cahoots with the aliens. That's how they were able to launch Sputnik in the first place. But anyway, the Soviets contacted the alien command base and filled them in. Fearing exposure to the public, the aliens sent word to one of their many ground operatives who manifest themselves as humans, infiltrating our society. This operative was none other than Jack Ruby. In order to prevent the downfall of the Soviet Union and successively the alien race, Ruby waited for Oswald to appear outside of the Dallas police headquarters and fired a single shot into his abdomen. The bullet hit the chip, which self-destructed upon impact. Thus, no evidence would ever be found to convict the Soviets of wrongdoing. The only piece left in the puzzle is Jack Ruby, but due to advanced alien technology, we will never be able to prove his being as extraterrestrial. However, in police custody, Ruby will be unable to return to the alien command base and receive regenerative lung tissue, which allows him to currently breathe in our otherwise unbearable atmosphere. It is my prediction that Jack Ruby will die within 3 to 5 years. Mark my words.
Another important man in our nation's history, I bring to you Dina Rahal speaking on Martin Luther King Jr.
Welcome back, everyone. Now let's begin to talk about a very influential man that's loved by all people across the nation, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr., our cherished Nobel Prize winner, was assassinated around 6 p.m. on April 4th of 1968. He was fatally shot by a sniper as he was standing on a second-story balcony of the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. An ambulance arrived promptly and rushed King to the St. Joe's Hospital, where he was pronounced dead within an hour. A Remington rifle was discovered a block away from the motel he was staying at. Further investigation led by the Federal Bureau of Investigation concluded that James Earl Ray, a 40-year-old fugitive who escaped from the Missouri prison 2 years prior, was the main suspect. Ray had registered to stay in a rooming house that he had a full view of Lorraine Motel. His identification led to a manhunt. On that same night, Robert F. Kennedy, New York senator, delivered the news to Indianapolis, Indiana, even when the local police warned him that they would be unable to provide protection for the potential riots. The death of the violent civil rights movement advocate came as a shock to many. Different responses were acted out by the people, whether peaceful protests or utter chaos. The next morning, following his murder, thousands of people peacefully marched throughout Fayetteville Street to a rally at City Hall. However, other responses proved to be violent, like the one on April 6th. Arsonists set around 15 fires throughout the city. Firefighters were called into action along with the National Guardsmen that worked to protect the firefighters from the rock-throwing crowds. Curfews were imposed, but actions similar to this one occurred anyway. Throughout the ordeal, tens of thousands were arrested.
Now marking an important feat in history, here's Natalia Stahl bringing to you the moon landing.
On this day, June 21st, 1969, astronaut Neil Armstrong took one small step for man, but one giant leap for mankind. NASA's Apollo 11 touched down on the surface of the moon yesterday, June 20th, at approximately 20 hours and 18 minutes. 6 hours later, Armstrong became the first human in history to set foot on the moon, and was shortly followed by fellow astronaut Edwin Buzz Aldrin, who became only the second. While Michael Collins, the third man of Apollo 11 mission, commanded the spacecraft still in lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin collected lunar material with which they will return to Earth. The pair also created a memorial, planting an American flag and a plaque with the inscription, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind."
Sick of dull silverware, rusty appliances, and dirty bathrooms? Try Comet Cleanser today. Simply sprinkle on some powder and rub away. Within no time, even the toughest of stains will vanish. Comet is safe for use, yet powerful on dirt and grime, so your objects will be left in perfect condition, shining brighter than all the stars in the galaxy. You can't stop Comet, you can't top Comet, so buy Comet today. Available at your nearest grocer. Thank you, Natalia. And now bringing us to a lighthearted and peaceful time. Here is Elena Suherk with coverage of Woodstock.
This was the scene of the biggest music festival of the 1960s, Woodstock. Originally supposed to take place in Woodstock, New York, the show was moved to a large dairy farm in Bethel, New York, a month before the event. From August 15th to August 17th, nearly 500 people attended the free concert. The large crowds caused heavy traffic jams and headaches for locals, supposedly shutting down the entire New York Thruway. Nevertheless, the show kicked off with Richie Havens and showcased dozens of artists, including Creedence Clearwater Revival, Janis Joplin, Santana, The Who, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and Jimi Hendrix. Heavy rains caused muddy conditions for thousands of concertgoers, but that didn't put a halt on the good times. A large majority of the attendees were hippies, and the festival was full of love, drugs, peace, and social harmony. The event proved to society that despite the potential for looting, chaos, and riots, people were capable of joining together over the power of peace and music.
What a great time it was. However, this brings us to the event that yet continues today, the Vietnam War.
Honorable soldiers spent years living and fighting in the jungle, surrounded by the armed Viet Cong forces. Soldiers were forced to use trench warfare in order to remain unseen and proficient. The original motive for American involvement in Vietnam was to prevent another communist takeover, similar to the Korean War. In 1954, a small team of American officers were sent to Vietnam to obtain intelligence on North Vietnamese communist agendas. Meanwhile, soldiers were being deployed to South Vietnam to help train and strengthen the South Vietnamese in hopes of eventually defeating other communist beliefs in the North. However, as things got more in-depth, America would soon see themselves fighting in the stalemate war.
There were dozens of hidden centers all over South Vietnam for squad and platoon leader weapons and radio training. This caused the U.S. soldiers and the South Vietnamese to keep caution.
Despite President Johnson's reassurance that America would easily win the war, hopes were declining as every year more and more men were being drafted. This is also leading to an immense growing isolationist sentiment within our nation in hopes that Johnson would retrieve the troops from Vietnam. However, the Tet Offensive would serve as a justification of the strength the North Vietnamese have, and thus the necessity to hold out and fight in the war. The Tet Offensive was one of the largest military campaigns of the Vietnam War, launched on January 30th, 1968 by forces of the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese. This eventually led to retaliation by the U.S. and South Vietnamese and our eventual victory.
While we may have won the Tet Offensive and have retreated from the war, Vietnam still remains at war with no clear victor.
And here we have a view into the life of a man whose son was drafted into the war. Back to Melissa Kanguda interviewing Orlando Kanguda, explaining to us all about the draft process. Hello. Today we are lucky enough to be joined with one of the parents of a young man who was drafted for the Vietnam War. All the controversy recently has been about the conscription in our great nation. On the contrary to previous wars, this one's going to draft based on a lottery. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, the government came up with, I believe, what they thought was a fair way to recruit young men immediately after high school, and they decided that the date of birth of the young man was going to be the number, and then draw a lottery based on that.
Can you tell me what lottery number your son was for the draft?
Unfortunately, he was one of the first ones. He was born October 18th, which was the fifth number selected. Pretty much the first 100 picks are a sure thing that they would be going to war.
How do you feel about his deployment, and how do you think it'll affect your family, and what do you plan to do if he doesn't return?
Well, I don't want to think that. Definitely it will affect our family. When you have kids, you never think about them going to war and definitely not coming back. I don't want to think that he's not coming back. I want to be very positive and think that he is coming back to us after 2 or 3 years in Vietnam.
Do you think that the draft should be based off of the lottery, or should the government have a better way of organizing the draft as opposed to picking 1 out of 366 blue plastic balls out of a glass container?
I hope that they thought about it. I hope that they've thought of different ways, and this was the fairest way of recruiting young men. I don't know, I'm not involved in the government, so I couldn't tell you. I'm hoping that they thought about it and decided this was the best way to take them to war.
Do you regret not having your son go to college or get married just in time to dodge the lottery?
I do regret very much that he didn't go to college. Marriage, I think hopefully when you get married, it's for different reasons, not just to avoid going to war. I think that if he would have gone to college, he would have a better future than now. Something very uncertain, which is we don't know what's going to happen during the war in Vietnam, and again, hopefully he will come back to us.
Is there anything you want to say to your son if he's out there listening?
You're catching me off guard, but I just wanted to tell him that to be safe, to just be careful, and to keep in his mind that he is coming back, and son, we're waiting for you.
Thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on this celebratory day and for coming with us on this journey through the years. Have a great evening and see you next year. That's all for today, folks!
Channel 5